the first time you heard about COVID? How far did you think this would all go? I work in Swiss as a ski instructor. Of course we have people from all around the world. One guy actually comes from Wuhan area. He was showing me a map of where the virus has been spreading in the area. Big red circles, places going into lockdown and such. We joked about it. Jesus Christ. Part of me really believed governments would be quick with action and it would die down quick. It was really shocking to me that they let people travel without any restrictions for so long. Still, my country has hardly had any proper lockdown. So many people have never done anything to stop the virus. Many offices never closed, and there are so many victims. Long COVID is starting to become a real problem alongside COVID patients. I thought we would all do more to save lives. Maybe I've read too many stories of the heroism of my country during WW2. I thought we could be a little bit like them. Pretty naive, huh? As soon as my husband heard of a case in New York, we live in a very small town in the Midwest, he told his grandma to stay away from groups of people and to have us run her errands. I'm the one who overreacts. So when he was that serious I knew it wasn't good. We both knew once it was passed on from China it was bad. It didn't take me long to realize just how many people are selfish assholes. First, yeah, I thought it was another bird flu / MERS scare story. Then it appeared like crazy in Italy. Within 2 weeks, it was obvious there was a significant amount of asymptomatic infectious transmissions. There was real data from Italy, showing 80% of the town was infected asymptomatically. And then, nothing happened. No closing the borders, no quarantine. No testing of any but the most tell people, no masks or gowns, and in fact even no recommendation for ordinary citizens to wear a mask, because there weren't enough for healthcare workers. It was pretty obvious by then, we're either all going to die this year, or else this is going to become endemic, changing civilization forever. I figured a couple of weeks. But my real question is, if everything were handled perfectly both by the government and citizens, how long would it last? I mean, if everyone truly agreed to just hunker down in their homes and not leave for a month, and people in hazmat suits delivered the whole country world groceries, would it have only lasted a month? I was actually at my sober house when things started shutting down. I remember being so angry because our weekly trip out was cancelled. Lol. To be fair, we were stuck in our sober house except to grocery shop or go to meetings, so it was boring. No one took it seriously. Although it was an overreaction, that it would only be a few months, we were all pissed because we had to shut down the second house and keep it clean in case someone got sick. So we all had to room with each other. Previously we all had our own separate room and there was a whole other house. I went from despising my mask to not wanting to take it off. First time, a joke. Yeah, okay, the Wuhan flu, big deal. When reports were coming out from China of welding apartment buildings shut and silencing reporters, I spent 100 on canned veggies, rice and beans. This is the exact moment I knew it'd be no joke. Wife said I was a lunatic. We locked down few weeks later and I felt pretty damn good about that choice. I was one of those people who seemed to be ahead of the game and taking it serious in mid to late January. I had been seeing news about it in China and dig deeper, seeing how crazy shit was getting there. They were literally welding closed doors to whole apartment buildings to keep people isolated. I knew then in my gut that this was a big deal if I started seeing cases outside of China, so I prepared, bought supplies, and watched for case announcements in the US. At this time I didn't wear a mask yet, although I had bought some, but I did start wearing gloves to do some things, limiting my outings, and washing my hands regularly. Sure enough, cases started being reported. As soon as the first 2 in my state were reported, I started working from home. I also started wearing a mask if I had to go out. Luckily, I finished buying a few months of supplies a good 2+ weeks before lockdown started. Having read about the last major pandemic, I had an idea for how long these things have lasted before, and to not expect it to just disappear overnight. When my wife and I were telling friends and family that this was coming back in early February, they all didn't believe us. Some got mad because they wanted us to go to graduation events that May, and we told them it likely wouldn't even happen. It was cancelled in April. One of my last trips out to get the final supplies on my list, the cashier and bagging person were talking about it, and one asked, "You think it's going to make it here?" meaning our city. I just interrupted them as I was walking away and said it already is. I knew case counts at that time was a trailing indicator since we had nothing in place yet to conduct testing. If we had one confirmed case, we likely already had thousands not yet known. I hate that I ended up being right about everything. I was following the news coming from China closely through February to March. I've played a lot of Plague Incorporated in my time, and I had a bad feeling that coronavirus was going to be a global problem. Already kind of being a germaphobe, I quietly prepared by gathering anti-box soap and hand sanitizer, and had a small collection of disposable masks ready. My coworkers and friends laughed in my face until about the second week of March. Then no one was laughing. I would have liked to have been wrong. Frown. First heard of it either late October 19th or early mid-November. Unknown infection, flu-like symptoms, China. At first, I didn't pay it much mind. Then, sometime in December 19th, I watched some videos and thought this could get bad. January 20th, and I knew it would get bad. Here we are, June of 21, and we are still dealing with it. I remember the first day I heard about it online and just thought, oh great, another thing people will pretend to care about to make their lives seem more interesting. Even at work, I talked to a bunch of people about how it wasn't going to become anything and was just bad in China because of the air quality. Pretty much up until people were recommended to start wearing face masks, I just thought everyone was overreacting. Looking back, it is weird to see going from this is nothing to WTF aren't people wearing masks? In just a month or two. I didn't think it was going to be that bad. While packing up my stuff and carting it out to work from home, my boss catches me in the hallway looking a bit panicked. "I dunno man," he laments. "This sounds a lot worse than originally thought." After a heavy sigh and uncomfortable silence, he lays out his apocalyptic premonition. "This is something that we might end up dealing with for 1, maybe even 2 whole months." I was a patient at Providence Hospital where the very first U.S. case was being treated. The tension was palpable. Every professional in the building seemed to know what we could be in for if this wasn't taken very seriously. When I was discharged, I went into lockdown weeks before it was even being considered nationally. I've pretty much been in lockdown ever since. Hopefully I can get the jab within the next day or two. So, yeah. I saw the potential for this crisis long before many others. Not that helped in any meaningful way. I remember reading about it in the news in late January or early February. I am always kind of a sucker for a doomsday virus scenario, so I followed it with morbid interest in the beginning. A few weeks into February, I was seeing reports of how far and wide it was spreading throughout the world. It still wasn't getting more than a passing mention in the US news, but places it was hitting were reporting on it quite a bit more. I remember talking to coworkers and some of them hadn't even heard of it or just from the 30-second blip in the nightly news. As I started to see more and more reports about how quickly it was spreading, I started to get a bit more concerned. People I worked with, family members, folks online, some were concerned about it, other people not so much. Slowly, very slowly, I started to stock up on little things when I went out to do some shopping. I don't like to stock up on things normally, because I live in a very small house, and don't have much storage. Some canned goods here, boxed food, TP, paper towels, frozen meat, cases and gallons of water. Then about a week before the official lockdown was announced for my state, I went to a bulk food store, and filled that cart with just about everything I thought I would need for a little while. Pretty much all of the things I mentioned, just much more of it. I felt a little crazy, but I thought, there isn't any harm in it. This stuff will keep for a long time, so eventually I will eat it. Lockdown was announced a few days later, and I was relieved. Maybe not the right word, but the store shelves in my town went bare in like 24 hours. People went fucking nuts. I had tried to tell a few of them that I was very concerned with how the US was treating it versus the rest of the world, and few paid me lip service, but most did nothing. Over the next few months, I honestly figured it would never end, not with the selfishness and pettiness that I was seeing in the news, from our leadership, and from the people in my own town. It was super disheartening to see, even as the numbers climbed, how people were still denying it, fighting back against the smallest things, fighting each other and denying science. To this day, I don't think it will ever end. There will be those who put themselves above all others, and people who will, on their deathbed, deny anything is wrong. They will actively fight against their own well-being, and that of their family, all in the name of personal freedom. I never got sick, but I did buy a Nintendo Switch, and built a new computer, with graphics card. Those first few weeks while everyone else was still trying to find TP, eggs, milk and bread. So, I suppose I won? ? I always knew it would be terrible since my country's government is corrupt as fuck. Politicians literally stole funds that was designated towards fighting the virus and funding research for a vaccine. When the government decided to finally help the poor people who have lost their jobs by giving food hampers, city officials and were filmed carrying hampers away to their own personal vehicles, where politicians openly break the very COVID restrictions they put on the rest of the country, by throwing mad political events only to pay a small fine and go about their business like nothing happened. This is the state of those in charge of a country, where the Ministry of Police said that white farmers should not complain when they get killed by people of color. Now the whole story is being covered up and it's disgusting. We have beautiful beaches and good weed, but South Africa's fucked, guys. The first I heard of COVID, I was told it was totally under control and wouldn't be a problem here, but for some reason my confidence in that statement wasn't just zero, it was like a 5-alarm fire notification blaring in my head. It had to be a looming catastrophe. Once I got good science-based information about it, I was more confident that we could get through it, because it should have been a no-brainer. But then when the brainless morons showed just how far they were willing to go to deny there a problem and did everything they could to make a buck of the results, it was clear we were in for the long haul. Fortunately, there are still enough decent people in the world for us to get through this, but it ain't over. Too many morons still in denial, refusing to do their part to bring this thing under control. I had been following the China outbreak on Reddit. This was before it hit the main news here. I'm a nurse and was telling everyone at work about it on shift one day. I told them about the outbreak getting to Italy and tried to warn them that this was going to be much bigger than they expected. Everyone thought I was a crazy conspiracy theorist. My manager told me it was being blown out of proportion and everyone was just overreacting. Just a few weeks later, her hospital was going into crisis mode about how to deal with the incoming COVID crisis. No lie, it felt satisfying to bring up with her that I was right all those weeks ago. I traveled from Minnesota to Miami at the beginning of February. On one of my flights, a woman was wearing a surgical mask, and although I had heard about COVID, I thought that was a little crazy. At the end of the month I read about Dr. Nancy Messonnier at the CDC saying we should all be prepared to stay home for as long as 2 weeks, and I was shocked. 2 weeks? How are we all going to stay home for 2 weeks? And then starting a few days after that I barely left my house for a year. I read a lot of history. I stay up to date on the news. It never occurred to me that it was possible in the 21st century that our primary reaction to a public health emergency would be more or less what it would have been 500 years ago. The first morning of lockdown in my area of DFW, I went for a walk and marveled at the deserted streets during what would normally be rush hour. I was pretty impressed at how seriously people seemed to be taking the situation, and I thought that maybe we had a good shot at severely slowing the spread of the virus, as long as everybody did their part for a few weeks. Then, right in front of me, on an almost totally empty major thoroughfare, I saw the only 3 cars on the road get into a 3-car accident. Then I remembered how stupid everybody is. I wasn't worried too badly until we got directives to start masking at work and we shut our doors to the outside world. I thought it would last a week or 2. Hard lockdown for a little while would suck, but we would get through it. Things changed day by day. First, stay home if you feel sick at all. Wear a mask while in the building. Then you can work as long as you don't have a cough and fever, but wear an N95 at all times, but ignore the normal use protocols you can wear it room to room. It was hard to keep up, but we did our best. Then we started to watch with growing horror as it spread through the US and cases kept closer and closer, and a PPE shortage warnings started arriving. Don't throw your mask away, you have to reuse it. Use gloves sparingly. We can't get more. It was like living through an apocalyptic movie. Everyone that coughed was eyed with suspicion and fear. Can't let the virus in our facility. 1 year later and I am traumatized. I don't think I have fully processed my trauma yet. The agony of watching someone gasp for breath as you try desperately to stabilize them and keep them off a vent because you know they are too old and won't make it off. Weekly, sometimes twice weekly testing and waiting to hear if the COVID ward grows. Months behind plastic barriers with little supplies and exhaustion. Overworked, understaffed and direly short of PPE. I caught it when my overused N95 broke in a patient's room as I pounded on their chest to try to bring them back. Spoiler alert, I failed. Over and over I failed and watched my patients carted out in body bags. Held iPads so tearful families could say goodbye because we couldn't let anyone in. Held hands as patients I had cared for years took their last breaths. I had the funeral home's number memorized, but I couldn't tell you the date or the last time I ate. The dichotomy of work world and outside world was beyond insane. Into gaslighting, watching as the leader of our country downplayed what I battled every day. Past people in stores refusing to mask while I left every shifter and stripped on my porch to try to keep my family safe. Listen to Deniers claim it was a hoax, screaming about the survival rate and it wasn't worth sacrificing their right to a haircut or go to a bar, while I went to bed praying that the patient I left in bad shape the day before pulled through. It was maddening. I had and still have nightmares of cold blue alarms. I can no longer watch medical shows because the sound of alarms and code blue send me into nauseated crying, cold sweat-filled panic attacks. I left my job bedside and moved to ambulatory care due to extreme PTSD. I couldn't lose another patient. It would break me. I sobbed the day I got my first COVID vaccine. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. I felt like that shot in my arm was the first truly deep breath I had taken in a year. It was hope. And now a year later, as more get vaccinated and humans start to win against the virus, it's a glimpse at the sun returning after the worst storm I have ever weathered. I heard about it December 2019/January 2020. There were photos people got by hacking CCTV cameras in China of people getting welded into their apartments. bodies being hauled off, and people being forcibly quarantined. There were GPS photos of mass burial sites and mass cremations. TBH, I thought it would be worse. It was still bad, but I thought it was going to be a Black Death level pandemic that would have killed off a quarter of the population.